Got a question for you. Is Wally a boy or a girl? Gordy, no. I'll give you a minute to think that over. And while you do, hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed, and hit that like button if this is a video that interests you. Welcome to Actual Fandom. Today, I wanted to look at something that's kind of been on my mind lately. I was watching Star Wars not long ago, and I'm looking at C-3PO and R2-D2, and they keep referring to both of them as he and him throughout all of the movies. And I started thinking, what makes them he's and hims? And that sent me down a rabbit hole of just thinking about every robot and artificial intelligence that I could think of in science fiction and even in real life. And I have questions. I hope you'll work through the questions with me as I go through a list of robots and artificial intelligence and just try to figure out what is their gender. So I think most people, when they look at Wally, they would think he's a boy, in large part because of the name. Wally sounds like Wally, you know, like a guy named Wally West, the Flash. But besides that, what else is there? It's not even a human form, and yet our impulse is to apply a gender to it. He's got no genitals, he can't reproduce, he can't have sex, and yet he has a gender in most of our minds. But a lot of us have probably never even thought about why we just apply a gender to this robot that isn't human in remotely any way. Robots are basically a blank slate. Humans can create a robot to be whatever we want it to be. So how about C-3PO and R2-D2, and pretty much any droid in the Star Wars universe? I mean, you can look at them. They don't have reproductive organs. I mean, C-3PO is more or less humanoid looking, but R2-D2 is nothing like a human. He's a trash can. R2-D2 doesn't even have a male voice the way that C-3PO does. And yet we and C-3PO call R2-D2 him, he. Looking at our home listening devices, Alexa, Siri, and so on, the default setting is that they're female. Research shows that most people, men and women, prefer a female voice when it comes to, a helpful assistant. And this is probably based on the gender stereotype of, like a woman being the helpful assistant, a secretary. But what about the Iron Giant? He's referred to as he and him. Clearly doesn't have any reproductive organs. What about HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey? HAL is just a little red light, and it speaks with a male voice. But like Siri or Alexa, what if we just switch that voice to a female voice? Would we then switch the pronouns? I think we would. And if you don't think you would, you're probably being dishonest. What about the Vision from the Avengers? If we are looking at the one in the MCU, it seems that Vision chose to be a male. I mean, he could manifest a cape and a costume and everything. We saw him do that in Age of Ultron. So presumably, if he wanted to manifest some boobies, he could do that, and he could speak with a female voice. But the Vision chose to present as male. See, the point of all this is to show how we view gender and the subconscious biases and preconceived notions that lead us to see a certain robot or AI as male or female, despite the fact that they have no penis, vagina, testicles, breasts, unless those things are built onto them. One study, for example, found that participants judged a robot programmed to perform security work as being more masculine, because subconsciously people tend to think of masculinity as a more protective trait. But that's not universally true. It's just one of those unconscious biases that we carry around. The problem is capitalism's tendency to gender every product that it can, because that's way better for marketing to a specific demographic. Bic, who makes pens and lighters and so on, they have specific pens designed for women. Does that pen do anything different than a regular pen or a pen designed for men? No. They have ink in them, you hold them, you can write, draw, you can drop it on the floor and go, I don't know where the pen is. It's all the same. How about Barbies and the original G.I. Joe figures? You may not know this, but originally G.I. Joe was the same size as a Barbie doll. Functionally, there's no real difference between a G.I. Joe of that early era and a Ken doll, right? They're basically the same thing. But one was marketed for girls, one was marketed for boys. I think it's a good idea to start to pay attention to how often certain products, services, and so on are specifically targeted to us for our gender. Ultimately, that means that you're allowing an economic system to decide who you are. There was a study done recently in Japan, and this is Japan, not the US, so Japan is not hyper woke like the US, so you know you can trust this study. But the study showed that when people are shown images of different robots, they tend to choose a particular pronoun to apply to that robot. They refer to a robot with a straight torso 90% of the time as a male, but robots with more pronounced waists and hips, you guessed it, they were called female, despite the fact that, once again, they don't have any reproductive organs. If they were shown an image of a certain robot that had kind of narrow, small shoulders, that was often perceived as a female. Then an image of the exact same robot, but with broader shoulders designed on top of it, a lot of people thought it was a male. But as with the example of WALL-E, even if a robot isn't gendered, and even if it doesn't look like a human or even an animal, people still tend to want to gender it. Same thing with R2-D2. And that's something that pretty much anybody would do. Even a woke SJW would probably subconsciously choose to gender a robot that doesn't look anything like a human. The thing is that subconsciously we gender things because it helps us attach an identity to it. We infuse it with a personality, despite the fact that in real life, robots don't really have a personality yet. But why do we do that? Once again, money. People who make and sell robots want us to see them as having a personality, as something akin to humanoid, because then we're more likely to interact with it, engage with it the way that those robot makers want us to. And that means that we're constantly talking to Siri and Alexa and whatever household helper robot that we might have in the future. The point of all this is to say that people that try to say that gender and sex are the same thing are also people who have definitely called C-3PO or R2-D2 or HAL 9000 he, him, without ever giving a second thought that, the things that they use to try to dehumanize, misgender trans people do not apply to these robots that they just thoughtlessly apply pronouns to. The reason that they don't even consider these two opposing concepts in their mind is because they've been fed a lot of propaganda against trans and non-binary people. They've been told that, a man who transitions into a woman can't be a woman. Why would I use the proper pronouns? People like Jordan Peterson, who's currently, throwing a pissy fit because he's been kicked off of Twitter for misgendering Elliot Page. They make a big deal out of it when it's not a big deal. And if they were honest with themselves and thought about the fact that, oh yeah, I actually do refer to this little fucking trash can robot R2-D2 as a him. If they were honest with themselves about it, they would accept it. And they would realize that they've been fed a lot of garbage. And it's causing them to dehumanize human beings who deserve as much empathy, respect, compassion as anybody else. Hit the like button and subscribe. And remember, actual fandom means being an ambassador, not a gatekeeper.